The Iranian regime has a choice. It can either do a 180-degree turn from its outlaw course of action and act like a normal country, or it can see its economy crumble.
The U.S. ramped up pressure on Iran Monday, reimposing and strengthening sanctions targeting Tehran's oil, banking, and transportation sectors.
Our objective is to starve the Iranian regime of the revenue it uses to fund violent and destabilizing activities throughout the Middle East and indeed around the world.
The sanctions hit more than 700 entities as the U.S. aims to cripple Iran's economy and halt its nuclear program following President Trump's withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal. Monday's action brings the total number of Iran-related targets to 900, the highest ever, according to the State Department.
I promise you that doing business with Iran in defiance of our sanctions will ultimately be a much more painful business decision than pulling out of Iran.
But as the U.S. presses ahead to cut off the oil-rich nation, it will allow some of its closest allies and rival China to keep buying oil from Iran, as long as they work to reduce imports to zero.
These men may be the two-man clean-up team sent to erase evidence of the killing of Jamal Khashoggi a week after the journalist disappeared in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2nd. That's according to a Turkish government source who says the two men are a sign that top Saudi officials knew about the crime and that the men arrived embedded with the same group of Saudi officials sent for a joint investigation with their Turkish counterparts. Turkey's vice president on Monday called for an investigation into Turkish newspaper reports claiming that Khashoggi's body was disposed of using acid. Speaking at the UN on Monday, the president of Saudi Arabia's Human Rights Commission confirmed it will prosecute those behind Khashoggi's death. He said King Salman had instructed the Saudi public prosecutor to proceed with the investigation. The United States told the UN that a thorough and transparent investigation is essential. Khashoggi's sons, seen here with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, have issued an appeal for the return of their father's remains, saying their family is unable to grieve without them.
Tuesday's elections could bring a new dawn for Democrats, not just in Washington, but in state capitals across the country, where Republicans have been dominant for years. I'm Andy Sullivan in Arlington, Virginia, a state that Democrats hope is a sign of things to come. Voters here rejected a Trump-backed candidate for governor last year and elected more Democrats to the state legislature. The party hopes to see that story play out across the country on Tuesday, and it could end up winning in some surprising places. Marquee governor's races in Georgia and Florida are drawing national attention, but that's only part of the story. In deep red Kansas, Democrat Laura Kelly is running neck and neck with Republican Chris Kobach. Voters looking for a new direction after deep spending cuts enacted by former Republican Governor Sam Brownback.
We can either reverse course and go back to the Brownback experiment, which totally devastated our state, or we can go forward.
It's smarter government.
A similar story in conservative Oklahoma, where Republican Kevin Stitt is battling Democrat Drew Edmondson. Teacher strikes earlier this year, a sign of discontent over GOP policies. Michigan, Nevada, Ohio, and Illinois among the other top targets for Democrats. Republicans currently control 33 governor's mansions and 2/3 of the state legislative chambers. The state-level battle tends to get overlooked as all eyes are focused on Congress, but in many respects it has a more direct impact on people's lives. Over the past decade, Republicans have tightened access to abortion and restricted voting laws in many states. They've also controlled the redistricting process, which has helped to entrench their dominance. Democrats are starting out from a deep hole here. They hope to begin digging their way out on Tuesday.
A pre-dawn police convoy carrying one of the world's most wanted men. From a jail cell in Manhattan to a Brooklyn federal court Monday, officials taking no risks that the defendant, who twice escaped prisons in Mexico, might do the same on U.S. soil. The trial of Joaquin Guzman, a.k.a. El Chapo, entering the phase of jury selection, and the judge taking extraordinary precautions to protect the people who may decide the fate of the notorious crime boss. Reuters legal correspondent Brendan Pearson.
Unlike in a normal jury, where during jury selection they would be asked their names, their place of employment, kind of details about their lives, where they live, that kind of thing, we're not getting any of that. They're just being called into the courtroom with a sticker that has a number on it, and their name is not being put on the public record at all. Jurors are going to remain anonymous for the entire case.
The judge also ordering jurors be partially sequestered for their safety.
In this case, what partially sequestered means is that the jurors are going to get an escort of armed U.S. Marshals into and out of the courthouse, and while they're in the courthouse, they're going to be sequestered from the public, meaning they're not going to have any interaction with anyone outside of the jury in the courtroom.
Guzman twice escaped from prisons in Mexico, the most recent time through a mile-long tunnel out of his cell. He was extradited to the U.S. in 2017 after Mexican authorities captured him a second time.
He's being held at a special cell in the Metropolitan Correction Center, which is in Manhattan, and that's just because it is the highest level of security that was available in New York City. So he has really minimal contact with anyone. It's basically solitary confinement.
Every time he's moved from his cell to federal court, police have closed a section of the Brooklyn Bridge, roiling morning traffic in America's largest city. His trial is expected to last 4 months. Police say that as head of the Sinaloa cartel, Guzman directed multi-ton shipments of heroin, cocaine, and other drugs into the United States. If convicted, he faces life in prison.
Polls open for the midterm elections in a few hours, and it's not just voters paying attention. Wall Street is watching just as closely, bracing for either a red or blue wave and what either means for a number of industries. Reuters markets correspondent Louis Krauskopf says healthcare stocks are the most at risk.
In particular, if Democrats gain more control, you could see shares of pharmaceutical and biotech stocks sell off on fears that Congress may try and implement more strict controls on pricing. But one potential positive could be that you'll see an expansion of health insurance coverage if Democrats gain more control, perhaps through more states taking up expanded Medicaid. That could be a benefit for some health insurers and some hospital stocks.
Another sector that could be in play, financials, including JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. A Democratic-controlled House could mean the lax regulations of the early Trump years come to an end.
If you see more hearings related to bank activity, that could be an issue for those stocks.
While financials could face a less favorable environment if the Democrats regain some control, there is at least one sector that could fare well no matter what the outcome of Tuesday's vote.
Greater federal spending on infrastructure has been talked about since Trump won the presidency, but he hasn't been able to push it through yet. It is an area that is a potential policy place for compromise between the Democrats and Trump.
Investors betting on that are likely to pour investment dollars into construction and raw material companies, which could benefit the likes of Caterpillar.
They're back again. After 10 years, the Spice Girls have announced they're back together for a second reunion tour and will be selling tickets this weekend for 6 dates across Britain. This time, though, 5 become 4. Victoria Beckham, aka Posh Spice, will not be joining them, although Mel B did admit on a talk show that Victoria may join them at some point. It wouldn't be the first time the groups toured without all members. They formed in 1994, racking up album sales in the tens of millions, with songs like Wannabe and Say You'll Be There. 4 years later, though, Ginger Spice Jerry Halliwell walked out, leaving the group to finish their American tour without her. Then, after releasing an album called Forever in 2000, the group split up completely. The last time all 5 performed together was for a one-off performance at the 2012 London Olympics, and before that in 2007 during the first reunion tour.